In a world where love and loyalty can curdle into manipulation, one woman finds herself at a crossroads. At 68, she becomes the unwitting financier of her son Kevin and daughter-in-law Jessica's extravagant lives, a silent witness to the laughter that echoes through her own living room, where she is reduced to little more than a walking bank account. But on a fateful morning, as panic fills Kevin's voice, the scales tip. A simmering rage ignites within her, one that promises to shatter the binds of guilt and obligation. What happens when a mother stops being a mere ATM and reclaims her identity? Before. The soft hum of the machine filled the dimly lit room, a stark contrast to the tempest of emotions swirling within me. This was the moment I had been waiting for, but had been too timid to embrace. Clarity, it seemed, had finally pierced through the fog of complacency that had enveloped me for so long. The sun began to rise, casting a golden hue across the kitchen, illuminating the very walls that had witnessed my sacrifice and silent suffering. Each beam of light pierced through the bitterness, revealing a past history written in financial transactions and emotional neglect. I sat at the table, my fingers poised over the keyboard, ready to reclaim what had been taken from me. Not just my money, but my dignity, my identity, and most importantly, my sense of self-worth. In that pivotal moment, I scrolled through my bank statements, each line a reminder of my devotion turned into desperation. I could see the expenditures that had consumed my savings, but more painfully, I could see the years of my life I had traded for their happiness at the cost of my own. Every vacation they took, every item of clothing Jessica purchased, each expense was a nail in the coffin of my independence. I felt anger wash over me, but this time, it wasn't directed at my son or his wife. It was aimed at the version of myself that allowed it to happen. As the hours slipped by, I made a list. Bills unpaid, commitments unfulfilled, dreams deferred. I realized I had been living vicariously through their lives while my own aspirations gathered dust. I had once been a woman of dreams and ambitions, a figure of love and guidance, but I had faded into the background, reduced to a mere shadow of my former self. The realization struck me like a bolt of lightning. I had been complicit in my own marginalization. My heart raced as I drafted a new budget. It was time to take control, to say no, and to draw the line. I was done being the enabler of their lifestyle, the silent spectator in my own life. With every keystroke, I felt lighter, as if I was shedding the weight of expectation and guilt that had chained me to my role as their financier. The sun now fully illuminated the kitchen, and with it came the warmth of newfound resolve. I envisioned a future where I could reclaim my passion for painting, the hobby I had given up to support their dreams. I longed for travel, for laughter that wasn't tinged with mockery, but filled with genuine joy and companionship. I would no longer be the old woman they dismissed. Instead, I would be Eleanor, an empowered woman who had the right to dictate her own life. Just then, my phone rang, and my heart sank at the sight of Kevin's name flashing on the screen. I took a deep breath, a mixture of apprehension and exhilaration coursed through me. Perhaps it was time for an honest conversation, a moment of reckoning. The laughter that once rang in my ears now felt like a distant echo, replaced by the powerful crescendo of my own voice rising in defiance. As the phone continued to ring, I recalled all the years I had spent placing their needs above my own, and the years of resentment that had built up inside me like a dam ready to burst. No longer would I allow their laughter to drown out my voice. It was my turn to speak, to demand respect, and to reclaim the life that was rightfully mine. The time had come to turn the tide. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long, golden fingers of light that danced across the well-worn wooden slats of the patio. Each beam illuminated the fine flecks of dust drifting lazily in the warm air, while the soft rustle of leaves formed a gentle backdrop to the tension brewing just beyond the oak door. The tranquility of the moment was almost palpable, a stark contrast to the storm brewing just outside it. Here, on the back patio, the outside world felt both incredibly close and impossibly far, as if separated by the thinnest of veils. Eleanor's heart pounded as she settled deeper into the worn cushions of her seat, each breath a testament to the weight of her decision. The birds at the feeder, flitting about with their own worries and desires, seemed blissfully unaware of her turmoil. They scraped and chirped, a vibrant cacophony of life that hinted at the simple pleasures Eleanor had long neglected. It was in this moment, amidst the chaos outside, that she felt a stirring within, a quiet affirmation of her own existence, unfiltered by the demands of others. Wasn't it strange how the smallest details could become monumental when peace was finally within reach? Yet, as she sat there, the laughter and joy of the birds was overshadowed by the sharp, insistent knocks that echoed through her home like an unwelcome ghost. Jessica's voice rose and fell like the tide, demanding her attention, yet Eleanor remained steadfast, rooted to the spot in her sanctuary. The irony of the situation tugged at her. A woman who had spent years accommodating the whims and expectations of others suddenly faced with the absurdity of being deemed the villain in her own narrative. The chaos outside morphed into a surreal theater, each character playing their role to perfection. Kevin's strained pleas, imbued with a desperate tone, contrasted sharply with Jessica's fierce indignation, the two of them seamlessly trading off between anger and manipulation. It was a familiar dance, one that had played out many times before, yet today it felt different. The power dynamic was shifting, and for the first time, Eleanor felt a glimmer of control, an ember flickering to life against the ashes of her past. The thumping at the door escalated, a visceral reminder of their desperation. With each thud, she could almost see the scene unfold in her mind, the uncomfortable dinner, the sputtering of excuses, the mortification that had followed. Kevin, caught in a web of embarrassment, desperately trying to keep his facade intact as his mother sat across the table, horrified by the unraveling of their carefully constructed image. The thought of the older woman digging into her purse, the reluctant hero of the day, struck Eleanor with a bittersweet humor. It was a sight she could almost laugh at, if only she weren't the one at the center of it. And then, as unexpectedly as a summer storm, Jessica's voice shifted, morphing from fury to feigned sweetness. It was a chilling transformation, the kind that could freeze the blood in one's veins. Eleanor could hear the practiced lilt in her tone, the syrupy facade cloaking the underlying threat that always accompanied it. It was the voice of someone who had learned to wield words like weapons, a skill honed through years of interpersonal warfare. It was a reminder that the battle lines had always been drawn, and now, they were circling back to confront her once again. "Mom." Kevin's voice joined in, a soft plea that resonated with the underlying currents of their history. It was a tone she had often succumbed to, but it felt different this time. The clarity of the moment crystallized around her, and she understood. This wasn't merely about the past or the conflict at hand. It was about her life, her autonomy, and the reclamation of her narrative. The juxtaposition of her serene patio and the tumult outside was striking, a visual representation of the internal war she faced. As the sun dipped lower, casting shadows that stretched like the doubts she had long held, Eleanor felt the strength building within her. Today marked a turning point, not just a confrontation. Today, she would choose her own story. In the delicate tapestry of familial relationships, power dynamics often weave a complicated narrative where love and obligation can blur the lines of autonomy. Eleanor found herself at the crux of this emotional battlefield, a point of realization that would ripple through the fabric of her existence. The confrontation with her son, Kevin, was not merely a clash of wills, but a much deeper awakening, a reclamation of her agency. As she sat in her familiar space, the patio bathed in a soft golden light, a profound metamorphosis began to unfold within her. The revelations of the previous evening, stark and unsettling, echoed in her mind like a distant thunderstorm. Discovering her son's unauthorized use of her credit card for indulgent subscriptions and unnecessary luxuries sparked a fire, one that ignited a long-dormant resolve. For years, Eleanor had played the role of the dutiful mother, the unwavering support, but now, she felt as though her identity had been hijacked, her resources exploited, and her narrative rewritten without her consent. The act of revisiting her was not simply about financial redistribution, it was an emotional excavation. Once a document drafted with love and hope, it now felt like shackles binding her to a gratitude she no longer felt. The realization that she had been treated as a financial reservoir rather than a cherished matriarch forced her to confront a painful truth. Generosity had transformed into a transactional relationship. This epiphany was a seismic shift, marking an evolution from self-sacrifice to self-assertion. With each passing moment of contemplation, Eleanor's determination solidified. This was not just about her estate or the money that had funded Kevin's whims. It was about her very essence. She envisioned her future, free from the weight of others' expectations and entitlements. The decision to reallocate her estate was empowering, a declaration of self-worth, a rejection of the narrative that had suffocated her for too long. In this light, the change was not simply financial. It was a reclamation of identity, a promise to herself that she would no longer be a victim of her own generosity. The dawn of that day brought with it a renewed vigor, a sense of clarity that had eluded her for years. She awoke not to the dread of financial burdens or the clamor of familial demands, but to the exhilarating prospect of carving out a life unshackled from guilt and obligation. The simple act of planning for her own well-being became an act of radical resistance against the tide of familial expectations. As Eleanor prepared to call her lawyer, she felt an invigorating mix of anxiety and exhilaration. Each message on her answering machine, laden with concern and desperation from her family, reinforced her conviction. The tears in Jessica's voice, Kevin's frantic pleas, and Carol's urgings were not cries for help but echoes of a system that had relied on her for far too long. In their worry, she heard only the desperation of those who had come to view her not as a mother but as a provider, an entity to be tapped into. The morning unfolded like a new chapter in her life, one that promised the freedom to prioritize her own needs and desires. The act of closing the accounts that had once served as a safety net for her family felt like severing the ties that bound her to a past of unreciprocated devotion. Eleanor envisioned a future where she could indulge in her own aspirations, perhaps even splurge on something she had long denied herself, a book, a piece of jewelry, or a small trip, entirely for her own joy. In that pivotal moment, Eleanor stood at the crossroads of her life, poised to rewrite her story. The sunlight that streamed through the patio cast an ethereal glow, a symbol of the enlightenment that had finally illuminated her path. For the first time in many years, she felt the exhilarating thrill of possibility, a leader of her own destiny, ready to move forward unfettered by the expectations of those who had come to take her for granted. Today was not just another day. It was the dawn of Eleanor's new life, one crafted with intention, courage, and an unwavering sense of self. Eleanor's heart raced, not with fear but with a burgeoning sense of liberation. As she sat in the quiet aftermath of her confrontation with Brenda, the echo of their tense exchange reverberated through her mind. It was a battle not merely for financial autonomy but for the very essence of her identity, a struggle to assert her right to self-determination in a world that had long sought to define her by her relationships and obligations to others. In that moment of clarity, she understood that the stakes were far higher than mere monetary matters. This was about reclaiming her narrative, rewriting the rules of a game she had unwittingly consented to play for far too long. Eleanor had spent years in the roles of caretaker, provider, and emotional crutch to those who had taken her kindness for granted. Her decision to change course was not only a personal revolution but a radical declaration of her worth. Brenda's tactics were familiar and, at times, suffocating. Guilt, fear, shame. These were the weapons of emotional manipulation that had been wielded against her for years, and yet, Eleanor now recognized them for what they were: attempts to maintain control over her life and finances. In the past, these tactics might have weakened her resolve, leaving her feeling like a prisoner in her own home. But after finally confronting the uncomfortable truth that her generosity had become a tool for exploitation, she was ready to reclaim both her power and her peace. The notion that her financial decisions could lead to accusations of mental incompetence sent chills down her spine. It was a chilling reminder of how the bonds of family could twist into chains of obligation and emotional blackmail, distorting love into a currency of control. Yet, rather than succumbing to despair, Eleanor embraced the clarity that came with acknowledging her worth. Her interaction with Brenda had been a decisive moment, a line drawn in the sand, heralding a new chapter of self-respect and courage. With her lawyer's reassurances still ringing in her ears, Eleanor began to envision the life she deserved. Her thoughts drifted to dreams once shelved, traveling to distant lands, spending lazy afternoons with a book in hand, indulging in the simple pleasures of life without guilt or reservation. She had always admired women who dared to put themselves first. Perhaps now, she could embody that spirit herself. The confrontation with Brenda had revealed the fissures in her family dynamics, exposing a deeper rift that extended beyond mere finances. This was a revelation of character, who truly valued her for herself, and who valued her only for the resources she could provide. Jessica's tears, while heartbreaking, were laced with the self-centeredness that often accompanies an unexamined life. How could she have seen Eleanor as a second mother while simultaneously viewing her as a bank? This contradiction struck Eleanor with profound clarity, prompting her to discern the genuine relationships in her life from those that were merely transactional. As she contemplated her next steps, Eleanor felt invigorated, emboldened by the knowledge that she was not alone in her quest for autonomy. Countless women before her had faced similar struggles, battling the invisible chains of duty and expectation. Each story of triumph over adversity resonated within her, urging her forward. In sharing her journey, Eleanor hoped to inspire others entangled in familial bonds that stifled their own ambitions and dreams. The day after her confrontation, Eleanor awoke with renewed purpose. She engaged in self-care rituals that had long been neglected, meditative walks in the sunlight, cooking healthy meals that delighted her palate, and journaling her thoughts and dreams with fervor. Each action reaffirmed her commitment to this new direction. She was no longer just a caretaker. She was a vibrant individual worthy of love, joy, and freedom. As the days turned into weeks, Eleanor began to reshape her world. Her financial decisions became reflections of her values rather than obligations. She delicately crafted boundaries, learning to say no without guilt and to prioritize her own well-being. The journey was fraught with challenges, but every step was a testament to her growth. Each moment of resistance to old patterns solidified her resolve. Eleanor was not just surviving, she was thriving, crafting a future that was rich with her aspirations and dreams, no longer confined by the expectations of others. The light that had once been obscured by the shadows of duty now shone brightly, illuminating a path of authenticity and empowerment. In this newfound clarity, she found the courage not only to guide her own destiny, but perhaps to inspire others to do the same. The resolution of Eleanor and Jessica's tumultuous financial relationship marked not just a turning point for them, but also a profound evolution in their personal identities. As they both navigated the choppy waters of financial independence, they began to dismantle the old paradigms that had dictated their interactions and expectations. Eleanor's resilience and unwavering commitment to boundary setting became the bedrock upon which a new relationship could emerge, one defined by mutual respect and empowerment. In the aftermath of their candid discussions, Jessica found herself at a crossroads. The sting of humiliation she experienced in the restaurant had been transformative, awakening her to the realities of her financial ignorance and dependence. This confrontation with her own shortcomings catalyzed an intense self-examination. For the first time, the naive comfort of living beyond her means had been replaced with the harsh truth of a budget that revealed a stark disparity between income and expenditure. The realization was sobering. They had been living in a mirage of affluence, a facade built on Eleanor's support, and it was time to strip away those layers of illusion. With Kevin's reluctant but inevitable agreement, Jessica began to understand the value of their shared decisions. The realization that they lived in an apartment that exceeded their financial capabilities ignited a fire within her. They no longer just faced numbers on a page. They faced the implications of their choices, the weight of their irresponsibility, and the need for a restructured life. Jessica and Kevin's decision to downsize and simplify their lifestyle reflected a resolute commitment to change, an acknowledgement that sacrifices were necessary. As the fabric of their relationship began to unravel the unwholesome threads of dependency, both women took deliberate steps towards healing. Eleanor's honesty about her resentment served as a mirror reflecting Jessica's past behavior, an uncomfortable yet necessary reflection. The unspoken expectations that had once lurked silently between them were now exposed to the light. It was an act of liberation for both parties. Eleanor no longer felt burdened by the role of the unwitting benefactor, while Jessica was compelled to acknowledge her past reliance and work towards becoming a responsible adult. The road ahead was not without its obstacles. Restructuring their relationship meant grappling with the emotional fallout of their dynamic. Jessica had to confront her feelings of shame and the fear of not measuring up to Eleanor's expectations. Eleanor, meanwhile, had to wrestle with the implications of her decision to withdraw financial support, a choice that, while liberating, also carried the potential to fracture their bond irreparably. Yet, amid the uncertainty, they both found solace in the shared goal of rebuilding their relationship on new foundations. Their conversations pivoted from financial dependencies to deeper connections grounded in respect and accountability. Jessica's request for Eleanor's support in times of genuine emergencies signaled a shift from entitlement to a recognition of interdependence. It was a subtle yet powerful transformation, allowing Jessica to redefine her notion of help, not as a crutch, but as a lifeline that she could one day earn through her own efforts. The lasting impact of this resolution reached beyond their immediate relationship. It rippled out into their communities and social circles. Eleanor's newfound assertiveness and Jessica's commitment to financial independence began to serve as inspirational stories among friends and family. Eleanor became a beacon of confidence, encouraging others to reclaim their narratives and establish boundaries that honored their values. Jessica, on her end, transformed into a testament to the power of change, illustrating that financial literacy and independence can emerge from vulnerability and accountability. Their journey ultimately highlighted the essential truth that relationships thrive on respect, autonomy, and understanding. As they forged a new path, both Eleanor and Jessica illuminated the profound potential for transformation that lies in facing uncomfortable truths, each step resonating with a quiet strength of empowerment and growth, forever altering the course of their lives. In the crucible of financial reckoning, Eleanor and Jessica grappled with uncomfortable truths, reshaping their identities and the foundations of their relationship. Through vulnerability and accountability, they unearthed a profound understanding. True empowerment lies not in dependency, but in mutual respect and the courage to embrace radical change. A new chapter begins.